A whale looked up and saw a subway car with teeth rising from the deep. That was Megalodon, the largest predator the ocean ever built, and it wasn't the only terrifying monster hiding somewhere in the fossil record waiting to be discovered. Before it ever existed, Cretoxyrhina was already slicing through plesiosaurs and mosasaurs with knife-shaped teeth at mako shark speeds. And honestly, once you see what evolution was building toward, modern great whites start looking like house pets. So let's meet the nightmare that came first, and then the one that made every other predator completely obsolete. About 100 million years ago, the ocean was already a place you didn't want to be. It was warm, deep, and packed with animals that looked like they were designed by a committee of horror directors. We're talking plesiosaurs with necks longer than fire trucks, mosasaurs that could swallow a person whole, and fish the size of small cars that had teeth like garden shears. And in the middle of all of that chaos, something was swimming that made the other monsters nervous. Cretoxyrhina mantelli, or the Ginsu shark, was basically what happens when evolution decides to build a great white, but gives it a bigger budget and no oversight. This thing reached about 26 feet long, which puts it in the same weight class as a modern orca, except it was faster. Paleontologists think it could match or even beat a short-fin mako shark in open water, and mako sharks are basically the cheetahs of the ocean today. So picture an orca that moves like a missile and has a temper to match. But the teeth are what earned it the nickname. Cretoxyrhina had knife-shaped, razor-edged teeth that were basically steak knives set into a conveyor belt of a jaw. And this thing wasn't just biting chunks out of prey, it was carving them apart with every single bite. Fossil evidence shows this shark targeted other active predators, including plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, large fish like Cephactinus, sea turtles, and even other sharks that thought they were the top of the food chain. It was a predator that hunted predators, which is a special kind of terrifying because it means nothing was safe, not even the things that were already at the top of the food chain. Fossils of Cretoxyrhina have been found from Kansas to Texas to Italy, which means this nightmare wasn't some local weirdo that only haunted one small stretch of coastline. It was a global terror. The largest complete fossil shark specimen on record belongs to this species, and when researchers cast it, the result looks like a great white that's been hitting the gym for 1 million years. It was streamlined, muscular, and built for speed in open water. And here's where it gets messed up. Cretoxyrhina was the most terrifying thing in its ocean for about 35 million years. This shark ruled the water without serious competition from 107 million years ago until about 73 million years ago, and nothing in the ocean could challenge it. And then it vanished. But the ocean doesn't leave a throne empty for long. Something else was already evolving, and this newcomer wasn't going to settle for being the fastest or the sharpest. Evolution was about to build the biggest. Jump forward about 70 million years to the Miocene epoch, and the ocean has changed. The water is still warm, but now the mammals have taken over. Whales are getting bigger. Seals are everywhere. Baleen whales were exploding in size, and early dolphins were spreading through coastal waters, building a buffet line for the biggest predator the ocean had ever seen. Evolution saw the opening, and it filled it with something truly absurd. Enter Audidus megalodon. And I need to be clear about something right away. This wasn't a big great white. That's like calling a freight train a big bicycle, a mistake so basic it would get you laughed out of any serious conversation about prehistoric predators. Megalodon belonged to a completely different category of animal, and the numbers are going to make your brain hurt. The largest megalodons reached about 60 feet from snout to tail. To put that in perspective, a modern school bus is roughly 35 to 40 feet long. So we're talking about a shark that could park 2 school buses end to end and still have room for a motorcycle somewhere in the middle of its body. If you're standing on the ocean floor looking up, the shadow would blot out the sun. Weight estimates put the biggest individuals at around 50 tons, which is the same as a railroad car and 10 times heavier than a Tyrannosaurus rex. A single female megalodon, because yes, the females were larger on average, could weigh as much as 5 adult African elephants combined without even breaking a sweat. And she wasn't even the record holder. Females dominated the size charts, which means the most terrifying individuals in the water were also the ones raising the next generation. A mother megalodon wasn't just big. She was the ocean's final boss, and she ruled the warm water nurseries with the kind of presence that made every other predator keep its distance. A 16-meter specimen, which is about 52 feet, would have carried a head over 15 feet long. Its gill slits were nearly 5 feet tall, and its dorsal fin stood over 5 feet high, which means these aren't body parts anymore. They're architectural features. A full-grown human could have swum through its gill openings without even ducking, and at that scale, biology stops while architecture starts. This animal wasn't just big, it was everywhere. Megalodon fossils have been found on every continent except Antarctica, which means it was a global apex predator in a way that no modern shark alive today even approaches. It was swimming in the waters that would become Maryland, Florida, Peru, Japan, and Australia. There was nowhere to hide. And here's the thing. At that size, speed doesn't matter. Sneaking up on prey isn't necessary. You just need to open your mouth. The ocean literally couldn't support a predator this size unless the food supply was equally ridiculous, and the Miocene was more than happy to provide exactly that. The Miocene was basically an all-you-can-eat buffet for a shark with a mouth the size of a garage door and an appetite that could empty a whale population. But size without a weapon is just a floating wall. And Megalodon didn't come to the party empty-handed. The teeth were triangular, serrated, and built for one job: shearing through blubber and bone like a hot knife through warm butter on a summer day. These things weren't just bigger versions of great white teeth. They were structurally different. Each tooth was a curved blade with fine serrations along the edge, designed to slice as the jaw clamped down. And Megalodon had rows of them. Dozens of teeth in the main jaw, plus reserve rows rotating forward like a conveyor belt of death. When a tooth broke off on a whale rib, another one slid into place within weeks. The root structure of each tooth was thick and robust, built to handle torsion forces that would crack a modern great white tooth clean in half. Megalodon didn't just have bigger versions of what you'd see on a great white shark. It had teeth engineered for a completely different scale of violence and destruction. Individual megalodon teeth have been found that are over 7 inches long. That's larger than most human hands. And these weren't display pieces. They were working tools that got used, broken, and replaced constantly. A full-grown megalodon might have shed and replaced certain thousands of teeth in its lifetime. Some of the largest recovered teeth exceed 7 inches from root to tip. Hold your hand up and look at it. Then imagine a tooth that's bigger than that, serrated on both edges, and being driven by a jaw that could snap a small boat in half. That's what we're talking about. The bite force is where the numbers get genuinely disturbing. Conservative estimates put its bite at roughly 10 times the force of a modern great white shark, which is the kind of number that makes paleontologists double-check their calculations. That means we're looking at a predator that could outcrush Tyrannosaurus rex. This shark didn't just match T-Rex in bite force, it beat it completely. To make this relatable, a great white can bite through a sea lion with no problem. Megalodon could bite through a sea lion, the boat the sea lion was sitting on, and probably whatever was on the other side of the boat. Jaws that wide aren't a mouth. They're a loading dock with teeth. The anatomy supported this weapon in ways that modern sharks don't even approach. Massive pectoral fins gave it stability at slow speeds, which is important when your body weighs as much as a railroad car, and momentum becomes a weapon. A powerful tail provided sudden bursts when it needed them. The body was built like a torpedo, but a torpedo the size of a subway car. It didn't need to outswim whales, because whales couldn't outswim something that could end the chase in a single bite. A 50-ton shark doesn't nibble, because an animal that size demolishes everything it encounters. And the menu was basically everything with a heartbeat and a layer of blubber that Megalodon could find swimming through the warm prehistoric oceans of the Miocene epoch worldwide. Megalodon's diet included whales, dolphins, seals, sea turtles, large fish, and other marine vertebrates. Whale calves were probably a staple food source. They're slow, relatively small compared to adults, and packed with calories. A single calf could provide enough energy to keep a megalodon fed for weeks. Adult baleen whales, early dolphins, and even other large sharks all ended up in the stomach contents. Isotope studies on megalodon teeth confirm a diet that was almost entirely marine mammals. This animal didn't diversify its menu out of desperation. It specialized in eating the biggest animals on Earth because nothing else was worth the effort or the energy expenditure. But adult whales weren't off the menu either. Fossilized whale bones from the Miocene and Pliocene show unmistakable megalodon tooth marks. These fossils show deep puncture wounds in ribs and vertebrae. They found crushed bone sections where the bite force simply shattered the skeleton. In some cases, paleontologists have measured the spacing between tooth marks and found they match known megalodon dentition exactly. This isn't guesswork, because paleontologists know this is a predator, signing its name in bone. In some fossil beds, the spacing between puncture wounds lines up perfectly with known megalodon dentition, which isn't some lucky bite, it's a signature carved in solid bone. Paleontologists have found vertebrae that weren't just bitten, but compressed, meaning the shark bit down with enough force to shatter bone before the prey even had time to bleed out. The hunting strategy was probably ambush from below. A megalodon would lurk in the deeper water, watch a whale pod passing overhead, and then rocket upward to strike the soft underbelly or the flippers. The force of that upward strike would have been like being hit by a submarine moving at highway speeds. Even a glancing blow from a megalodon tooth would have peeled blubber straight off the ribs, leaving a wound that would bleed out in minutes in warm ocean water. A direct hit to the belly or the flipper would have opened an artery the size of a garden hose. It's the same technique great whites use on seals today, except the great white is doing it to animals its own size. Megalodon was doing it to animals the size of a city bus. This predator didn't need to kill every day. Here's a number that should break your brain. A megalodon could fully consume prey the size of a modern killer whale, and then not need to eat again for 2 months straight without slowing down. That isn't a predator, it's a biological demolition crew that operated on its own schedule. Isotope studies on megalodon teeth show they occupied the highest trophic level ever measured in a shark. That means no other shark species before or since has sat at the absolute top of the food chain the way Megalodon did for millions of years. It wasn't just an apex predator, it was a super apex predator, and the ocean built its entire ecosystem around the assumption that this animal was the ceiling. Nothing successfully hunted them down. No rival ever competed with them and won. For millions of years, they were the ceiling of the food chain. Megalodon went extinct roughly 3.6 million years ago, and the reason should keep you up at night. This animal was unstoppable, perfectly adapted, and dominant in every ocean on Earth, which makes its complete disappearance one of the strangest stories in the history of evolution. And yet it vanished completely. The answer isn't dramatic, it's just kind of depressing when you look at what actually killed the biggest shark ever. The oceans began to cool. Megalodon needed warm, shallow water nurseries for its pups, and those nurseries were shrinking. Scientists have identified specific coastal zones that once served as megalodon nurseries, and as global temperatures dropped, those zones became too cold for the young sharks to survive. Whale populations were changing at the same time. Some species went extinct, others adapted and shifted into colder waters that megalodon simply couldn't follow. Suddenly, the buffet closed early. These weren't gradual changes that gave megalodon time to adapt. Cooling happened in pulses, and each pulse shrank the warm water zones that pregnant females and their pups depended on. Without safe nurseries, the population couldn't recover from losses. Extinction wasn't a single event because it was a slow suffocation spread across millions of years. And then there was the rise of the great white shark. Smaller, faster, more adaptable, and able to survive on a fraction of the calories. Great whites competed for the same prey without needing a whale-sized meal every few weeks, which meant they could survive, and even thrive, where megalodon simply starved. When the food grew scarce and the water got cold, the great whites kept swimming. But the megalodon didn't. Great whites didn't need warm water nurseries. They could hunt in temperatures that megalodon pups would never survive. They could thrive on seals and fish when whales were scarce. This wasn't a fair fight between equals. It was survival of the smallest body plan, winning by default. The final irony is almost poetic. Megalodon was too successful for its own body size. It evolved to dominate a world of abundance, and when that abundance ended, the most terrifying shark that ever lived had nowhere left to go. It was outlasted by its own appetite. So that's the ocean's real apex predator, not a movie monster, but a real animal that was so good at being terrifying that its only real weakness came from the planet itself, changing underneath it. Let me know in the comments which prehistoric sea monster we should tear into next. Because if you thought Megalodon was bad, wait until you see what was crawling on land at the same time. Subscribe and stick around.